All right, I wanted to do a full video on a great pattern that really is pretty universal and can be used for trout or anything, but I use it primarily for steelhead. This is going to be the Lance Egan's GTI caddis. That's kind of what we're going to end up with here at the end. It's a great caddis imitation. You can tie it with the flash, without the flash. A lot of different ways that you can do it, but I kind of just stick to the original recipe and throw that. I do great with this pattern on steelhead when they kind of turn off eggs and switch over to bugs. So it's a pretty easy pattern to tie. It's really not too in-depth, so we'll go step by step through this. In the vise is going to be these FW 541 ahrex hooks in size 10. I've got a tungsten bead on the end here with some 0.015 lead-free wire wrapped in there. Now, you can use a variety of different kinds of threads. I used a UTC 70 in black for this. So I'm going to get that started right behind the weight here and just kind of get that secured. I also like to take my thread and kind of run it through the wire. I don't use glue. So just getting your thread wrapped up in there and getting all of that intertwined, that's all you ever really need to make sure that's all secured. And that's not going to go anywhere. To be honest with you, getting the thread wrapped up in there is actually better than glue. I think glue would move way before that thread would. So that's how I do things. All right, first thing that I want to get tied in is the tail. Now this pattern doesn't have much of a tail, but it does have some peacock coming off the back of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take... You can use regular herl if you want, but I like some thinner peacock. I've got some natural strands and they run a little bit more thin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two strands and I'm going to hold them really tight. And I'm going to take my right hand, hold them really tight, and just pop them off. So if you break them instead of cutting them, what'll happen is the quill is buried up in there, and the points kind of come down at a taper a little bit more. And again, you want to talk about something that the fish probably really could not care less about, it's probably that, but it makes me feel like it's more effective. That's all that matters. I'm weird with that kind of stuff. That's why I do things certain ways. I'm a big confidence fly guy, so if I've got a fly that I know works, or if I've got a profile that I know I like, or if I have some feature of a fly, I fish it a lot more confidently. You can give me a fly that works great that I've never used before that I don't have confidence in, and I'll just stand there fishing it and thinking, I'm not going to catch a damn thing. I'm kind of weird with that. All right, so I'll bring this back up to the front. Peacock herl's real brittle. Just grab it, rip it right off. Comes off in 2 seconds. Now, the next thing I want to tie in is I want to tie in my secondary ribbing material. So I'm going to bend down here and I'm going to cut off a little piece of some 6X tippet. So I'm going to come in on the back side with that, and I'm going to get that secured on the back side of the hook with 2 wraps. And then I'm going to pull it to where the point on the other side clears those lead wraps. And I want to try to create a little bit of a taper throughout the entire tying process. So now I'm going to go down, get that cinched in all the way down to the tail. And I don't want to create a lot of bulk down here at the bottom. So I'm going to skip some wraps, make some really wide wraps to get my thread back up to the front. Next thing is the other ribbing material. The other ribbing material is going to be, if I can just get this cut, is going to be some of this olive Krystal flash. So I'm just going to cut one strand off of that, and I'm going to tie that directly in on my side of the hook. Nice loose wrap to get it in place, and then I'm just going to pull it tight and work my way down. Now this time I'm going to start building the taper. So I'm going to go down about 2/3 of the way, bring my thread back up, and at this stage I'm going to cut this little tag end just to get it out of the way there. And normally I don't have that much trouble grabbing something, but when you got the light and the camera and all that kind of stuff, it makes all this that much harder. Jesus, why can't I grab that? All right, so now I'm going to build up the bulk here leading up to the weight and bring that all the way down to the tail. Okay, so I'm going to back that up a couple of wraps just to get that a little bit more in the middle. I'm going to secure this tippet because it's driving me nuts every time I wrap. Okay, so next order of business, we have to get tied in the backing. Actually, nah, I don't have to do that step now. Let's do the dubbing first. All right, so I've got this clump of caddis green dubbing here, and I'm gonna pull off some strands, get a loop of that going. Now, because of the light being close to the fly, I'm gonna have to dub this in short bursts. So I'm gonna put as much dubbing on there as I can get without making my thread long enough to where it's hitting the camera. So I'm going to dub one section of this, and then I'm going to turn the camera off while I continue to add more dubbing. Nobody wants to sit there and watch that, so I'll do that in pieces. So I'm going to advance my thread down to where that peacock tail is, and I'm going to get a good wrap there to get me started. And I'm just going to start making some touching wraps all the way up. You don't really need too much of a taper. I mean, this is a caddis larva. It's not a mayfly nymph, so we're not looking for, you know, the same type of profile. But the underbody has a little bit of a taper to it, so you can pretty much just stay uniform with your thread as you work your way up. Man, this is a tight fit. I don't exactly... Oh, yeah, my dog's got something going on outside. All right, so let's get that going. Just continue advancing that up the body. Okay, so I'm going to pause that while I get some more dubbing on. All right, back in action here. We're just going to continue that all the way up. Now we're over the weight. And you want that little chunk there. So that's about as far as I want to go with that body. And I'm going to take my Krystal flash and I'm just going to start ribbing that all the way up. Try to keep that as even as you can. I know I'm going to kind of screw this up here just because, again, I don't have a lot of room to work with. I got a new pedestal base, so that's kind of screwing up the height of my camera. Okay, so we'll get that all the way to the front. Get the thread wrapped around, get that locked in. And we can say goodbye to this tag end. There we go. All right, fill that in a little bit. All right, next order of business is something that's going to take a little bit of modification. It's going to take some, where the heck is it? The backing of this fly is going to be a piece of nymph skin or a piece of shellback. I actually don't have the appropriate material, so I've got this 1/8 scud shellback in brown. And I'm going to do something a little weird with it. If you take a look at this, it's not particularly large, but if I were to lay that down on top of the body, see, that's going to overlap a little bit more than I would like it to overlap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this in half. And I have a particular process that I use to do this. And I would also like to point out that this is not a step that you absolutely have to do. It's just I like a little bit of a thinner backing on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hackle pliers and I'm going to clip my backing into that. I'm not going to show it. It's just a waste of time. But I'm going to take it. I'm going to clip that onto here. And then I'm going to hold it tight and I'm going to run a razor blade right dead down the middle. And that'll cut it pretty well in half. And I'm just going to take the piece that I already have made and I'm going to lay that right on top with the front part sticking forward and get that secured down nicely. Okay, next order of business is the thorax area. And I'm going to use some of this ice dub in peacock black. And I'm not going to go too crazy with this. Remember, it's a larva, so they don't, you know, they don't look the same in the water as a mayfly nymph. You ever see a mayfly nymph? They've got that bubble around them where, you know, their body's just kind of, they're not holding water, but it almost looks like there's a bubble of water around them. Caddis larvae don't really have that, so we're not really looking for that really super buggy look that you try to accomplish with a mayfly nymph. So this is going to be a little bit more straightforward. And I'm just going to get a nice tight noodle of that ice dub on there, not too thick. I'm going to get a nice wrap right behind that scud back, and I'm going to fill in that gap with a little thorax of dubbing. And that's about good right there. We'll advance my thread to the front, and here's where the tippet is going to come into play. I'm going to take my tippet out of my material holder, and I'm going to wrap it away from me. Well, actually, before I do that, let me get rid of this little chunk of dubbing here. So I'm going to wrap that away from me and bring it back towards me. So now it's on my side of the hook. And I'm going to take this scud back, and I'm going to drape it over the back, get it centered up nicely exactly where I want it, and once it's where I want it, I'm going to take that first wrap, moved on me a little bit, and I'm going to cinch that down right in the middle. And I'm going to grab it, bring it back towards me, and we're just going to wrap all the way up. Now, when you're about to contact the shell back, go real light so you don't push it away from you, and then once it's over the top of it, then you pull it tight. So again, I'm going towards the shell back. I'm gonna pull off a little bit of tension, get it over. Now I tighten it, grab it on the other side, and we're just gonna keep going with that process all the way up. I'll give it a nice segmented look. All the way up to the top. Let's get one more there. And then I'm going to cross the dubbing and lock that in with a few wraps. Okay. I always keep a pair of nail clippers handy in case I want to use tippet for anything. It just gets a nice close cut, and that's gone. All right, pretty good shape so far. So just about done here. I'm going to take that little tuft of peacock dubbing that I had, and I'm really only going to grab a couple of strands. I mean literally just 2 strands. And I'm going to make a really, really, really light, thin dubbing noodle. And all this is going to do is just kind of fill in a little bit behind the bead. And, you know, if you're a head cement guy, you can add some of that here too. If you've watched some of my other videos, you'll probably know that I am not a head cement guy. I don't really ever use it. The only time I ever use it is if I want to gloss up a head on a soft hackle or something like that. But I've never ever seen a scenario where it adds any durability at all, so I just simply don't use it. So we'll get a couple wraps in there, and that'll get us into our whip finish. Tie that off, tighten it. Let's get that tag end out of there. Last thing I want to do is I want to take the excess here on my tail. I'm going to come in here and snip that off. There's a little bit of an overlay there. And that is pretty much it. Really, really, really effective pattern. Fantastic for, you can fish it for trout, pretty much anything. For me, I'm really big with this pattern on steelhead. I use it quite a bit. And that is pretty much it. There's the underside. Not a difficult pattern to tie. It's actually very easy. The only thing you got to do is you kind of have to get used to the whole backing there down the back, but that's a pretty simple thing to do. So yeah, really, really good pattern, really easy to tie, effective for trout, steelhead, pretty much anything, any species you're fishing for. So any questions or anything, just leave them right in the comments.